Wow.
Anybody who's not speaking.
Yeah, right, exactly. Catch my breath. Mine is for Adrian, and I am intrigued by Jack Johnson also. And in your studies, and I guess this is kind of a social commentary, it appears that society is often, what I think, over-obsessed with a man's failed loves and losses of his female companion, which is, you know, reality is whatever that is. But I'm intrigued by who a man's male friends are. In your research, who were his friends? That's something I don't.
He didn't have any.
Oh.
You know, he basically had hangers on as his wife and his two mistresses.
Okay.
That's why I created that shadow character, because there was no one else to bounce off of. I mean, he was very much a person who was just like, it's me. This is my thing. I'm going to do it. You know, I mean, that's very American, right? I mean, he's like pulling himself up. Exactly. But then you look at it in the context of race and culture.
Absolutely.
You're only out for yourself. I mean, I guess it works now for an athlete to be incredibly self-absorbed and not think about the community. But think how great it is when someone like Kevin Durant, you know, gives $1 million to tornado victims and doesn't say anything about it because he's trying to help. You know, and so Jack Johnson wasn't that person. He wasn't a race man. He wasn't anything like that. He was amazing. He was an amazing figure.
Right.
Amazing American individual. If that makes sense. So yeah. So I ended up using his wife and his mistresses to sort of level the conversation.
Thank you.
It's a good question.
Speaking of being hypnotized, I don't think I breathed through the last 3 of your poems.
Right.
Only my breath, only my after breath.
They
Don't kill anybody.
no, thank you.
It's a good thing.
No, thank you. I mean, I really appreciate it. Nick alluded to this. That book just came out. This is only the second time I've read from it, which is part of the reason I'm really sort of relearning it. But after I went to pay my respects, I knew I wanted to read just poems from him in his voice and Etta's voice. Because I guess I didn't say this, but they're buried next to each other. Right. Even though she killed herself because of him, they're buried next to each other. So it's complicated. I think this will work a little bit differently when I can I wanted to hear like more poems from there. I didn't want I was trying to hear them. I was like hear music and those kind of things, but he just sort of commands a conversation because of how big he was. I think sometimes. So, but thank you for saying that about the poems.
Each one of you, how did you decide to perform or be public?
How do we decide to
what made you decide to be public or perform publicly?
Well, I watch a lot of pro wrestling. I watch a lot of infomercials. And I think I can probably speak for everyone up here, and I say we're probably all people who love poetry, really love it a lot. And I go to a lot of readings, and I just sort of thought that I want to go to readings that are more like a variety show. And so I stopped thinking at one point, it was a big thing for me to stop thinking about writing poetry or performing poetry that I thought was like really necessarily good. And I started thinking about what feels special to me, or what do I think people are going to get a kick out of. So I stopped, I started saying like, I'd like to put on a memorable and enjoyable and entertaining show. And I sort of said to myself, I'm obnoxiously loud. I love to talk. But by the way, the obnoxious loudness comes from a serious hearing problem, so I have a great excuse. But I should play to those strengths instead of...
And you? Each one of you?
Yeah, well, I wanted to be a rapper. And I was really bad at it. So poetry was the closest thing. Honestly, and so I went into it that way, and then realized that I like it a lot more. The performative aspect of rap music, I think it's something that possibly could be useful. I'm not sure yet how I can afford the right outfits.
The right teeth.
To me, there's an element of the fact that writing poems comes out of a certain kind of innate loneliness, that you're just kind of throwing a word into the void, and that's kind of pointless if you're just doing it alone. And there's a need to kind of like put it out there in the world and hope that at least one person hears that word and finds it somehow sympathetic or empathetic.
I wanted to be a break dancer. So that didn't work out. I was just thinking of this today. My first guitar, I spotted it at a Sears store when they actually sold some instruments. And I was like, wow, that's a guitar, huh, Mom? You know, and that was pretty high. And picked it up and turned it around and had this beautiful like sunburst paint on the back. And so she had a guy come over and gave me some lessons, and I thought it was, nice and everything, and I didn't really stick with it until high school came along, and I saw how guys were playing guitars tend to get chicks. I can go to a very superficial, I don't know what I want to say. It's like it was a social instrument to like play guitar, and people go, wow, this song. Pretty soon you got a group of people around you, and you're socializing. It's very easy that way to socialize. Otherwise, especially as a teenager, I had a very tough time talking to people. So basically the complete opposite of poetry.
At least at first it was. It's something different now. But in the beginning, that's truthfully how it came to be. So just a quick recap then. Infomercial, failed rapper, loneliness, and what was this last one?
Chicks.
Phil, does your question answer? Does it have a question mark in it again?
No, just saying, I love that cold, dark winter that you had, young lady.
Yeah.
And Mister, with your railroad, you were the whole time you were about ready to throw a dry rod.
I don't know what that means. Those local prophets, so we keep them around. Any other questions?
It's fantastic.
Go ahead.
Jim, I've seen you before here at Bonk years ago, when you were across the street. And I remember your style was very interesting. And I don't remember how you started playing in that particular style.
My bass player in the band I was in and the drummer were brothers, and they both quit on me, of course, at the same time. So it was a matter of just lack of resources of people to play with in the town I grew up in. And I started experimenting with it, thinking nothing would ever happen from it, until I saw a video that I ordered by Preston Reed, and it's called Expanding the Realm of the Acoustic Guitar. And I put that VHS tape in, and let it play the whole way through of him instructing, and never picked up the guitar. My mouth was just dropped because he was doing things similar to what I did tonight. And I took it out of the VCR, put it in the shelf, and said, yeah, right. Like just so far advanced, and eventually made my way back to it. But it's very much a piano-like approach. So it mainly started by watching him and guys like Michael Hedges. You guys have a very strong Michael Hedges connection here. I don't know if you know that in Racine.
We have a lot of strong fingerstyle guitar.
Because of John Strokes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and Michael would come, from what I understand, Michael came here so John can videotape his playing and figure out how the heck he does some of this stuff and teach it to other students. Yeah. Just throwing that out there.
Kevin?
Yeah, sorry for the rapper term poet. It's
roll with it.
no, but I think it's a very common transition, and especially teachers use it a lot as a tool for for schools to get into the poetry realm, saying, well, this is like rap music, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you make that transition? Because kids are so used to everything having to rhyme.
Right.
But a lot of poetry, there's more of a cadence than there is an actual rhyme scheme to it sometimes. I don't know, I get lost into it too, and it's hard to make the difference, and to go into the poetry realm, how did you make that transition, and how, I think it's difficult sometimes to say, okay, not everything has to go, and I think that's still, I'm not into the poetry world, so I'm learning in that sense as well, so.
No, that's a really good question. I'm losing my voice, so I have to keep coming back up.
Oh, no problem.
To the microphone. But, I think that they're really similar. I think all rappers are poets in some way. Some of them just aren't very good poets, and so part of the way that I imagined it is, if you imagine an MC, they're rhyming over a beat, so you have a very clear and distinct metronome behind them. And poets work from a metronome that only they hear, and so you can use meter, you can use form to create that metronome for the reader somehow. And really what I took from rap music was the way that allusion is used, right, or the way that simile is used, and also the way that we can be behind the language with that sort of bombast, which is not me, which is not most poets, but all MCs have bombast, even the ones that pretend that they don't. And so, I think that the connections for me are a little less, this sounds like poetry, and a little more like MCs use poetic device, and that's how we can make the transition, right? So if you hear Kendrick Lamar, or you hear, if you hear, right, Kendrick Lamar, he's an amazing storyteller, amazing. Or the Souls of Mischief, who we all saw last night, nobody knew, they were like, that was 20 years ago, it was great, like what? That was 1993 all over again, until the day when my head hurt. The way that they use simile is the same thing in rap as it is in poetry. And so, that's the way that I make that connection. And so when I came to the page trying to make the transition, I didn't think about what rappers talk about. I didn't think about anything beyond the way that they use language. Does that make sense? Okay. That's a good question.
Any other questions?
Just have one more.
One more from Barry.
Jim?
Yes.
The Native American flute is one, love it, you did it great. And the harmonica, I'm intrigued by your one-man band type of approach to the, yeah, exactly, I think that's great. Have you entertained playing anything else in addition to, I don't know what that could be, but as you continue to study the Native American flute, another instrument? Is there something lurking out there in the universe that we will see?
Yeah, I discovered I am really, really good at the triangle. Really. That's not a joke. I'm extremely triangle.
That's, I did the triangle lessons and I was kicked out of school.
Those four things can be pretty busy.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah, but seriously, at a party, I picked up a banjo. And I started playing,
I could see that.
People started looking and they're going, I thought you didn't play banjo. I go, I don't. I need to get one.
Yeah.
It turns out a lot of the guitar techniques that I'm using are failing techniques.
Exactly.
And that's a style of banjo.
Exactly.
I didn't know. But, so it's something I might pick up.
And I would suggest research your inner Slim Harpo, the great blues blues harpist. That I could see you doing some cool stuff.
Slim Harpo?
Harpo, yes.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
That was pretty monstrous. These guys just kind of came into Racine and dropped a little bomb. I want to